Welcome back to another Chart Nerd technical analysis video. Today we will be discussing the likes of VeChain. The ticker is VET against USDT, and we will be studying the monthly time frame. Now, before I start, none of these videos are financial advice. This is all for educational and entertainment purposes only. But the reason I wanted to look at VeChain today is because Bitcoin has been front running and continuously putting in new time highs. We saw 92K, I think it was the other day. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we've seen $90,000 Bitcoin. Okay, so Bitcoin is in price discovery. Bitcoin is shooting off into space, and some alts, you know, they did start to pick up a little bit, but they've been a little bit lackluster in regards to Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is front running the pack. But what tends to happen when we see money flow? So the rotation starts to occur once Bitcoin decides to have a cool off. So this is what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for Bitcoin to cool off so the money flow starts trickling down, first mainly into Ethereum, but secondly into the larger capped coins. Now, VeChain is a relatively large cap coin with quite a high market cap, but still has the potential for exponential growth this cycle. Now, hear me out as to why. So again, getting back to previous resistance levels for VeChain, what I wanted to look at here was something very important from last cycle. So from last cycle, in its inception in 2018 of July, it had this sort of 2-year level of resistance that it was under and had this nasty wick drop down to the all-time low back in March 2020. Now, obviously, this was during COVID times and everything took a battering. But a month after that was when the recovery began, and it was on the month of May 2020 that VeChain decided to break out of its multi-year resistance. Now, at this point, this is where it didn't look back, and from that May, it rallied up a whopping, from the breakout of resistance, around about a 53x in the space of less than a year. Okay, so things got really impulsive for VeChain. Now, don't get me wrong, this was the discovery bull run for it. And what's not to say that that can or can't happen again. I think VeChain is creating fantastic structure here, as we've got so we've got the high, we go from this high, we've got the low, you've got this high, you've got higher lows that have been building up over time here on macro structure, even higher lows here for the past few months. The only thing that's now missing technically is a higher high somewhere down the line, and you can see that you're just working up in this lovely sort of wave formation for VeChain here. So where are my bullish targets? Where are my bullish targets? How do we analyze potential bullish targets? Well, we can use the RSI indicator as one sort of guidance tool to indicate whether we are near a top or near a bottom. And as you can see back here, when the RSI was extremely overextended and had shadows of green, if you look at the price, this is where it would have been a relatively decent time to start getting something off of the board. Now, fast forward to where we are this cycle, and even though we are sort of higher than these previous lows back here during the last cycle, you'll notice that we are in fact lower in the RSI but higher in price. So we are sort of maintaining some really nice structure here. The RSI is creating some sort of, I would say this is a bullish divergence, because you've got higher lows in the RSI and this level of support has gradually been sort of holding as well. So what I'm trying to say is, when the RSI is down here in the floor, you ideally want to be getting involved. You don't want to be buying the tops when this thing has an explosion into next year potentially. And you know, if you're buying up here and buying the prices up here when you know you've just taken out the all-time high and it's in price discovery, then you're asking to shoot yourself in the arse pretty much. So what I'm trying to say with the RSI is, regardless if there's any sort of divergence, I'm not going to get into that anytime soon, but just using it as a healthy indicator where we are right now in the levels below the mid zone. We're actually at levels of 45, so below average. Nothing is saying that we're near any sort of blow off top yet, and that it's still to come into play. And this is where the RSI could start picking up and getting back into those sort of overbought regions like it did back in 2021. So the RSI tool here has given us the insight to say that we are still due some sort of explosion or haven't had any blow off top yet for VeChain. But looking at the charts here, how I managed to get my targets. Now, this target right here is very interesting, because if we go from the low of the previous cycle back up to the high that it fell from, and we get some interesting 1618 fib extensions here and a 2, I'm going to get a 1 and a 2. Actually, no, we'll just go for the 1618. What you're going to notice is that VeChain actually met its 1618 target and more last cycle. So from this low at 0.0015, retracing back to 0.028, once it actually took out its previous all-time high back in 2018, it rallied on and impulsively met the 1618 target at 16 cents. So this 16-cent target got met last cycle, and it's a 1618 fib extension once you take out the 1 fib. So from the low back to the high, this is a 1618 fib extension, and VeChain met it and some, in fact. So from that target, it actually had another further rally up of around 72% from there on in. Now, fast forward, if we use the same sort of method again to try and identify VeChain's target this cycle, if we go from this cycle's low, which was in June of 2023, and go back to our current all-time high, the 1618 fib extension target this cycle for VeChain would put it at, I know you're probably excited, sorry. It would put it at $1.83. Now, from current price, that would be an increase of around a 71x for VeChain. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to come into fruition, and if you are someone that considers market cap, that might be something that ends up being ridiculously stonkily stupid. So in that sense, if we wanted to be conservative and have a conservative target for this cycle, and the 1618 unfortunately doesn't get met, then a wise area to look for an extension target would be the 1272 fib extension, which is just below the 1618. We also have the 1414, but conservatively, once we take out the 1, the next target for me is the 1272. So really and truly, I think VeChain has the potential this cycle to get to 64 cents. Forgive me, 64 cents. I really do think that it has the potential to get to 64 cents. And one sort of key sign here is the break of this multi-year descending resistance that VeChain has been under since 2021. Once it breaks this resistance and starts getting above it, I think this is where the real sort of fireworks begin and things start to get very explosive going into the later parts of this year and into 2025. So it's all about tackling this resistance, because once it did it back here, and once it got back above its key golden ratios and held them as support, you can see that. So we broke above the golden ratios, back tested them for support on the 0618, and then exploded. So if we can sort of see a breakout here, get back above the golden ratios, back test them for support, just like it did in the last cycle, once it got back above the golden ratios, get back above the golden ratios, hold them as support, and then get that extensive blow off target going into next year. So that, I think, is something that we're looking for here. And again, I'm just keeping it short and sweet, giving a sort of breakdown as to how I think VeChain could potentially get to these targets. Now, one other sort of sign to give the game away would be dragging and getting back above these EMAs. So right now, these EMAs and this descending resistance are the key levels of resistance that VeChain needs to break out of. So these EMAs currently sit at a price of, the 55 is at 0.030, and the 20 is currently sit at 0.028. So if we could start reclaiming these levels and getting back above this descending resistance, I think this is where the fireworks really begin for VeChain. Reclaim the EMAs, create some sort of bullish divergence or bullish divergence or cross on the EMAs, on the monthly EMAs, and that is one sort of go sign you do not want to ignore. So for me, this cycle's targets for VeChain sit at 64 cents at the 1272 conservative, and then you've got the 1618 above. If we do see max euphoria, or market cap really doesn't have any meaning, sits at $1.83. Forgive me. And just before I go, if we do get the breakout just to the 1272, that in itself is roughly a 23 to 24x return. So nothing that I say in these videos is financial advice, guys. You can see how I've managed to get my targets. 1, you break out of multi-year resistance. 2, you backtest key EMAs and key previous golden fib zones for support. 3, you get the shoot off and the continuation into euphoria. 5, we've had the 1618 target met in the past. 6, fast forward to this cycle, again, rinse, repeat. You have the key descending resistance to break out of. We have the EMAs to reclaim, the golden fib zones to reclaim. And again, I know it's a long shot, but I think within the next few months, with continuous bullish market sentiment, if that does occur and we do get that euphoric alt season, this is where we could see that extension up to the 1272 or potentially the 1618, which was met in the previous cycle for VeChain. I hope you've enjoyed the content from Chart Nerd TA. Take care. Peace out.